The night was quiet except for the soft hum of rain against the glass as she sat at her desk, typing the last few lines of her resignation email. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard, but she pressed send anyway. She couldn't risk it, not after what she'd found out. The world might call him ruthless, brilliant, untouchable, but to her he was just the man she once loved and now had to leave. She'd promised herself he would never know about the baby. The company was his empire, his name on every wall, and she was just another employee with a secret growing quietly inside her heart. She packed her things in silence, one photo frame, one notebook, one life carefully erased before sunrise. The next morning he walked into the office expecting another routine day, meetings, deadlines, numbers, but something felt off. Her desk was empty, no coffee cup, no laughter that used to fill the corners of his mind. He frowned, asking his assistant, "Where's her report?" The assistant shifted nervously. "She resigned last night, sir," left a note for HR, but no forwarding address. His jaw tightened. Why would she just disappear? He spent the rest of the morning pretending not to care, but the truth followed him like a ghost, because deep down he knew she wasn't just another name on his payroll. That evening he found the envelope she'd left behind, sealed with his name, written in her careful handwriting. Inside wasn't a letter, but a small, folded, ultrasound photo. The air left his lungs completely, his hands shaking as he stared at it. The world tilted, nothing made sense, and for the first time in his life, the man who always had control felt completely powerless. He whispered her name once, quietly, then again louder, as if saying it might bring her back. But all that answered was the soft echo of rain against glass and the heartbeat he couldn't unsee. He sat in his office long after midnight, the city outside blurred through streaks of rain, the ultrasound photo still trembling in his hand. Every deal, every empire, every triumph suddenly felt meaningless compared to the tiny heartbeat printed in black and white. He couldn't breathe. He'd thought she'd left because of work pressure or pride, but this was something else. Entirely. By morning he'd turned his world upside down. His assistant barely finished greeting him when he said, "Find her now, I don't care what it takes." The staff exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever seen him like this, stripped of calm, stripped of control. His voice cracked when he repeated softly, "Just find her." Days passed with no answers, until one afternoon he stopped by the hospital to sponsor a new wing for charity, and fate played its cruelest hand. He was walking through the hallway when he heard a nurse call her name. A familiar voice answered, soft, trembling, but unmistakable. He turned, and there she was in a pale blue gown, standing by the window, her belly small but unmistakable under the light. Their eyes met, and the world froze. She went pale, her breath catching in her throat. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You didn't tell me." She looked down, tears already falling. "I couldn't. I didn't want this to be another deal for you." He shook his head. "I would have given up everything just to know you weren't alone." Her hands trembled, clutching the edge of the hospital bed. "You don't understand. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be the woman who complicated your perfect life." He moved closer, eyes burning. "Then you don't understand. I built that life, but it's empty without you, without this." She looked up, finally meeting his gaze, and for the first time saw no pride in his eyes, only fear, only love. He took another step toward her, his voice soft but breaking. "I searched every city, every name on every list. I didn't sleep, I didn't breathe, because I couldn't understand how you could disappear with my whole heart." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect myself, protect this baby from a life built on control, not love." He stopped inches from her, his hands clenched at his sides. "Control is all I've ever known until you came along and ruined it." She gave a small bitter laugh. "So that's what I am, a ruin?" He shook his head. "No, you're the reason I realized what I built was a cage. I just didn't see it until you walked away." Her eyes shimmered. She turned away, whispering, "You don't get to show up now and decide to be someone else," he said quietly. "I didn't decide. Life did that when I saw this." He held up the ultrasound photo, his hand shaking, the edges wet from rain. "I've looked at this every night, because it's the first thing that ever made me want to be better." Tears spilled down her cheeks, her voice barely a whisper. You say that now, but when the world starts judging, when the headlines twist our story, what then? He stepped closer again, his tone steady. Then, let them. Talk, let them lie. I'll spend every day proving the truth that I never wanted power more than I wanted us. She pressed a hand over her stomach, her heart caught between fear and hope. You really mean that? He nodded. I do, and I'll prove it not with promises but with presence. I'll be there for every heartbeat, every breath, every first word, every night. You can't sleep, because I don't want to miss a single moment ever again. For the first time since she left, her shoulders sank the fight, in her eyes softening into something fragile and real. Weeks passed quietly, her days filled with gentle anticipation, and his with quiet determination. He didn't send flowers or gifts, just himself, showing up every morning with breakfast waiting. In the hospital lobby every evening, reading to her from the old book she once said calmed her heart. The walls she had built began to tremble piece by piece, until one night she whispered, "You're really not leaving, are you?" And he smiled softly. "Not even if you tell me to. But love has a way of testing promises." The night the storm rolled in, the baby came early. Alarms blaring, nurses rushing, and for the first time in years, he felt fear that no amount of money could silence. He stood helpless. Outside the delivery room, her cries cutting through him like lightning. He pressed his forehead to the glass, whispering over and over, "Please let them be safe, please." Hours later, the nurse opened the door and handed him a small bundle wrapped in white. His knees almost gave out as he stared down at the tiny face, eyes closed, breathing softly. He whispered, "Hey, little one, I'm your dad, and I've been waiting my whole life to meet you." Then he looked up and saw her watching from the bed, pale and exhausted, but smiling through tears. "You made it," he said, barely able to speak. She nodded weakly. "I told you not to come late this time." He laughed through tears, crossing the room to kneel beside her. "I'll never be late again for anything that matters." He placed the baby in her arms. The three of them bathed in the soft hum of machines and rain against the window, the kind of silence that feels like forever. The morning sun slipped through the curtains, painting the room in gold. She was half asleep, the baby nestled against her chest when she felt a hand brush gently over her hair. He stood there still in the same clothes from the night before. Eyes, soft voice, quieter than the light itself. She smiled faintly. "You stayed," he whispered. "I told you I would." He sat beside her, the baby's tiny fingers curling around his thumb, and something inside him broke open in the most beautiful way. He had spent years chasing numbers, walls, power, yet here, in this small room, with her and the child. Everything else faded until only love remained. She looked at him, her voice barely a breath. "You really changed, didn't you?" He smiled, not with pride, but peace. "I didn't change. I just finally found what was worth changing for." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. The world outside would never stop talking, would never stop judging, but none of that mattered anymore, because the truth was simple, raw, undeniable. They weren't a story written by power or pity. They were proof that broken things could still become whole. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, whispered softly, "Thank you for not hiding anymore." She smiled through tears. "I didn't need to once you started seeing me." And as the baby stirred in her arms, the city, waking slowly beyond the glass, he held them both close, knowing this was where every road had been leading all along. If this story moved you, share it, so others never forget that one selfless act can rewrite a destiny in ways no one sees coming.